Thank you, Assemblymember. And Madam County Superintendent, Mr. Superintendent, to the Mayor, Principal, thank you to Judith and all of the hardworking members that represent all of the incredible staff here at this school and 9,000 others in the state of California that have committed to reopening or have reopened for in-person instruction in the state of California. 9,000 of the 11,000 schools now in the state have made a firm commitment with an opening date or are, like this elementary school, back in person for instruction. It was very instructional to me and the Assembly member, I'm sure, to hear from the kids themselves about a little bit about their experience on Zoom school, comparing and contrasting Zoom school to being back in the classroom, and not surprisingly, to hear from them the distractions at home, the inability to pay attention as well, to feel as connected not only to the subject matter but to each other, and to just see the kids back and see them light up. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. Their physiology changing when they talk about how great it is to play again, to be back with their friends. And yes, Judith, it was wonderful to hear them say how great it is to see their teachers. And so that's what we all been waiting for. That's what this is about. And we are seeing real progress, real momentum, aided by $6.6 billion of support to address the issue of learning loss, to allow us to reimagine the school year, not just the school day, to provide peer-to-peer support, tutors, mentorship, to deal with the social-emotional challenges so many of our kids are facing, to provide those levels of additional supports to the extent possible, individual by individual. It's not one size fits all. Individual needs, individual challenges, individual opportunities as we look into not only the rest of the school year, but we look into the summer months. And we're seeing some really wonderful and creative ideas already from districts all across the state as it relates to how they're stacking considerations for the summer and how they're looking at summer school completely differently, how they're considering extending the school year more formally, how they're looking to provide additional supports to substantively address learning loss. That $6.6 billion is additive to the $15.9 billion that the federal government is now sending to the state of California for additional supports for our public schools. So we're in a position we've never been in before. I submitted a budget this January, which is the highest level of funding in the history of California for K through 14 education. We provided a level of support to get back safely into the classroom and to address learning loss with flexibility. And now we will have additional supports from the federal government to add to those investments, provide more testing, provide more PPE, provide more opportunities to improve conditions, better ventilation, and the like. And so real progress, real support, and I think the spirit of the Assembly member, it's a reminder, something I've often repeat, and I'll say it again, when he talks about partnerships. There's an old African proverb, you want to go fast, you can go alone, but if you want to go far, you got to go together. And I think that spirit of partnership, that spirit of collaboration, building capacity, addressing issues, going through the collective bargaining process, going across the table, that will aid and advance our efforts, not just to open the schools, but to keep them open and to allow us to address issues in real time. 80%, it was wonderful to see, 80% of the children at this school are back in. We're not forcing anybody, but those that choose, 80% chose to come back in. I imagine you'll see that number even grow once people have some confidence. The parents need to have confidence, not just the teachers, not just the custodial staff, not just the bus drivers, not just the folks that make schools like this work, including in the cafeterias. But we have to build that confidence, a little bit of that muscle memory. You're getting us back into cadence. You start small, TK to 2, 3 to 6, you get 6 to 12, and that's exactly the cadence in this county. You'll be providing, I think, 6th grade to 12 in the next number of weeks, in the first few days of April. And again, we're seeing this replicated all throughout the state. This is part of the reason not only I'm here today, but it's also part of our efforts in Sacramento to advance not only the cause of getting our kids back in school by setting up a system here within the classroom settings, but also providing supports outside the classroom setting. And one of the principal things the state has done is it's prioritized childcare. It's prioritized childcare workers. It's prioritized investments in support so families can not only get back to work, but safely feel confident their kids are getting back into school, but they've got to have that support in place. So we prioritized vaccinations, not only to teachers, but also to child care workers. We're over 400,000 now of our educators that have been vaccinated. Remember, our original goal was 75,000 a week. Our original goal was 150,000. We're over 400,000 now, educators now having been vaccinated. We were one of the first states to set aside 10% of all our first dose vaccines to educators. And now, of course, we're seeing that replicated across this country. So we're encouraged by all of this progress, and we should be encouraged even more so by the following. Today, we're reporting 1.8% positivity rate in the state of California, 1.8%. That's the lowest. There's only 3 other states in America that have lower positivity rates, the 4th lowest in the United States of America. We today report 1,260 cases. Just consider, 8 weeks ago, we were at 53,000. Today, 1,260 cases. Hospitalizations down from their peak by 80%, ICUs down from their peak by 77%. 12.6 million vaccines have been administered in the state of California. That's more than all but 6 nations globally. In the last 24 hours, we administered 464,000 doses. That's the most of any state ever. It's the most we've ever administered. 464,000 doses in the last 24 hours, over 2 million doses in the last 7 days. So we're making progress. The only constraint, supply. We only received 1.7 million doses last week, 1.75 million this week, 1.8 million next week. That said, back to the optimism you heard from the Assembly member and the superintendent, light, bright light at the end of the tunnel. We're going from scarcity, where we're still struggling to get our turn, to go on that app and to get prioritized, to get access to vaccines. We're going from scarcity in the next 5.5, 6 weeks to abundance. You heard it from the president himself. You heard it from the CEOs that are responsible for manufacturing these vaccines, that we're going to be in a completely different place in 6 or so weeks as we see the significant increase in manufactured supply, not only from Pfizer and Moderna, but also J&J. J&J has been a little stubborn in terms of the total doses that have come into the state. We've received only 341,000 doses of J&J. We were anticipating a lot more than that by now. But the good news is we have the confidence and the security that by the end of next month, J&J's availability will increase exponentially, adding to our ability to provide real choice and more voice as a consumer in terms of either wanting a one-shot regime, one and done, or going back and securing a second shot through those traditional, and I say traditional only because they're the first 2 vaccines that went out, Moderna and Pfizer. And so progress across the spectrum, economy starting to move again. 47 today, 47 of our 58 counties have moved out of the less restrictive tier. That's today's update. We saw a lot of movement last week. We've seen a lot of movement this week, and you're going to see even more movement next week. There's only 11 counties still in the purple tier. San Diego, Sacramento, and others moving today out of that most restrictive tier. So more and more business activity, more people back in schools, more and more energy, more and more optimism about this state and its future, your state of mind, our collective future. And so with that, I'm grateful again to be here, and of course mindful that many of you are here, perhaps for reasons known and unknown. But with that in mind, we'll happily open for questions. Oh, just one second. Just one.
Yes, thank you. So two questions, actually. First of all, the vaccination for teachers seems to be so successful. Do you know what the success rate was as far as teachers who have participated in accepting the vaccination? Secondly, where do we stand with the next eligibility tier? We've noticed that Tier 1C was taken away, which actually includes journalists and possibly defense, other categories. So will there be another eligibility tier coming up?
No, on that, it's a stair step. And as you know, just yesterday, we increased the eligibility to include people 16 to 64 with pre-existing conditions that we enumerated, including those with intellectual disabilities, not just physical disabilities. Obviously, we're looking at exposure. We're looking at exposure risk and age risk. Those have been our primary factors in terms of prioritization. But when I say stair step, I'd anticipate over the next days and weeks, you'll continue to see, as more and more supply comes into the state, a loosening, moving our way towards where the puck is going May 1st, where we loosen up for everybody and all the tiers are completely removed. So we anticipate that cadence. That said, our North Star continues to be equity. And this is something California is doing that most other states, almost all, are not doing, and stubborn. And I got to tell you, it's probably the hardest thing we're doing. It's that equity measure where 40% of all of our supply we are providing with an equity lens. And we're still not close to where we need to be. I'm looking at these numbers every day. Even 2 weeks into this, those numbers are stubborn. And we're seeing more pop-ups. We're seeing more large-scale sites. And by the way, this site in Alameda is doing its job in terms of providing equity. Same with the large-scale FEMA site in LA. But we have to still do more. And we have to be mindful that work's just really beginning at the new scale that we have set. So forgive me, we're still in that scarcity frame. But over the course of the next few weeks, you'll see some additional loosening. As it relates to the specific issue of teachers in terms of the percentage, it's 400,000+ teachers, 410,000 that are educators, more broadly defined. That I don't know what percentage of take-up that is in terms of those, and I'll get back to you on that based upon our latest information. Oh, I'm sorry.
You said yesterday on MSNBC that we have multiple names in mind with regard to somebody who might replace Senator Feinstein should she retire. Does that mean that you are preparing for and anticipating her retirement? And have you discussed that issue with Senator Feinstein?
Quite the contrary. The question was a hypothetical if, and it was a yes/no question, and I answered it, forgive me, honestly, and that often gets you in trouble in politics. That said, I have zero expectation the senator is going anywhere, and have had extensive conversations with her on multiple occasions over the course of the last weeks, not just months, on a myriad of different topics. And I can assure you, Senator Feinstein is running at a different level than most folks. Senior senator with incredible experience. Not only is she mindful and nuance and detail, just look at the correspondence we get from her on a weekly basis around issues large and small in this state, but also with a reputation nationally that's second to none. Respect on the other side of the aisle, incredible capacity and intellect in terms of her work that she's doing in intelligence. So that was more of a hypothetical, but no anticipation whatsoever that she's going anywhere for years and years.
Governor, you recently called.
Oh, sorry.
Ask a question. There's a lot of support, good news with 1.8% positivity. That's
Yeah.
pretty remarkable. But obviously there are people unhappy with where things are going. How do you feel about tomorrow, March 17th, being the deadline
Yeah.
for the recall?
No, look, we're anticipating that they've got the signatures. And I just think it's important people know who they are. I mean, the chief proponent of this recall effort, the chief proponent, believes that we should microchip immigrants. That's the chief proponent of this recall effort. You look at the original sponsors of it. You have someone who's a member, proud member of the 3 Percenters, an alt-right militia group. Others that are devout conspiracy theorists that believe in QAnon. Another that literally supports the insurrection, supported it on January 6th. That's the group. This is the sixth effort to recall. I've been here 25 months. 25 months. I know it feels like, honestly, it even surprises me saying that. It's just been a little over 2 years. This is the sixth attempt. But they were aided by a judge that basically allowed them to close to get double the time. And now by the RNC, that's the second largest contributor to this effort. So when you have the it's federalized, you got Gingrich and Mike Huckabee and the Huck Pack. You got an entire network that's done hundreds and hundreds of things. All you need is a quarter of Trump supporters. It's the lowest threshold in America to get something on the ballot. So we're going to fight it. And it's not, it's about the governor, but it's also about you. It's about our values. It's about what we hold dear. Look at the petition. Look at the actual reasons they themselves listed. It has to do with immigration, the Browning of California. It has to do deeply with our values, the things we hold dear. And so I'm not just fighting for me, I'm fighting for you. I'm fighting for the values of the state. And there's a lot at stake because in these elections, who knows what can happen? And so I'm going to fight it. And that's why we wanted to get ahead of it before tomorrow. And that's why we're organized. At the same time, they will do nothing to take my eye off the ball, which is getting our kids safely back into school, getting our businesses back on their feet, getting this economy moving again, and making sure that we're doing everything in our power to get more vaccines in people's arms so that we can turn the page and California can come roaring back. And that's exactly what we'll do. We will come roaring back.
Governor, you recently said that you were worried about this recall effort. It seems like there's a shift in the tone recently. Why, as you address this?
Well, the reality is, looks like it's going on the ballot, so we're ready to go. And my tone is only this. It's one of intense focus, energy. We will fight it. We'll defeat it. At the same time, it's not going to keep me from focusing on my job 24/7, and want to make that point clear as well.
The 1.5 million signatures, between 1.5 million to 2 million that the organizers say that they have, would they have gotten those signatures had the judge not intervened?
No, they had run short. That's why they went to the judge, to get the judge to do something no other judge has done previously, and that's to give them this historic extension. So, you have time, you have money. A lot of money's coming, or a lot of the investments coming from outside the state. One of the biggest investors in this is a mega donor of Trump that literally, proudly worked to suppress the black vote in the last election. I mean, just learn about who these folks are, and I think it's just anathema to who we are as Californians. And I say that as a guy, I didn't spend my last year taking cheap shots, at the administration. I have a responsibility to work for everybody, and I have great respect for people who disagree with me, but this is just, this is a sideshow, this is a circus. It's going to cost $100+ million. What we could do here, Madam Principal, with $100 million? Literally. That money's now just burnt for the sideshow, this circus. And it's unfortunate. So, I'm a little intense about it. But intensity is about being a Californian, caring about our values, caring about the diversity of the state. It's our greatest strength. And I don't like this state. I love this state. And the best, this state is running record reserves, among the highest operating surplus in its history. #1 in America, again, just a few months ago, in innovation, the Bloomberg Innovation Index. Look at all these IPOs. This place is ready. It's poised to come back in ways that I don't think people can even imagine. That's where we are. We're this close. That's what we're going to focus on.
Governor, related to reopening, you socialized the idea of a green tier, that the state was working on a green tier. Can you tell us where that is? And related to equity in schools, for the schools that have not reopened or districts that don't have a plan and are now concerned in low poverty areas that they'll continue to lose out on state funding, what would you say to those districts? Well,
there's an additional $16 billion coming from the federal government, and the overlay of those investments are Title I. It has an equity frame. Our frame was LCFF, local control funding formula, which by definition is an equity frame. By the way, all this was stacked with an additional $8.5 billion that came from the first two CARES Acts, and an historic investment K through 14 education in my budget. So there are resources. The question is a resourceful mindset to be creative and work through issues and commit ourselves to the number one priority, and that is to safely get our kids back into school for their social emotional learning and to address their learning loss. And I'm mindful that success leaves clues, and the incredible work they're doing here will, I think, inspire those that may not be as close to doing what this district and what this county is doing. And I think you're going to see a lot of momentum in the next couple weeks.
Governor, on the reopening?
Oh, yeah, and the green, forgive me, just on the green tier. There's a number of things we have to be mindful of. We talk a lot about hesitancy. We talk about resistance to vaccines, not just hesitancy. This notion of getting to 70 to 85%, depends on who you talk to, herd immunity, is challenging, if not illusory, particularly in light of that and in light of the variants, the mutations. We are currently tracking 6 mutations. You've got the Brazilian, you've got the South African, you obviously have the UK variants. UK 375 today, the South African 4 in California, and the first Brazilian variant 48 hours ago was discovered here in the state through our genomic sequencing. You got 2 West Coast variants, it's over 6,000, and you've got a New York variant that we're monitoring. With these variants, we have to be mindful, even in a green tier, and this is your question about green tier, that we still have to have a framework so we can toggle and we can maintain a resiliency and a mindset, being a little sober and potentially iterative in terms of how we modify and conduct our business, even though broadly in that tier, we're back to a semblance of normalcy. And so that's what the green tier represents. It's not we've walked away and it's Texas. But it's a version of what we've been doing, but with the kind of flexibility that all of us are looking forward to, not least of which me. Thank you.
Governor, on the
Sorry.
reopening, some recent studies have suggested that you can fit a lot more kids in a classroom, 3 feet distancing, the WHO standard. There have been calls to the CDC, and apparently they're reviewing that. What's your administration doing? We were told by school officials here that would be a huge, huge factor in reopening secondary schools and reopening fully 5 days a week.
Well, we're looking for the formal guidelines to come out. We're very mindful, not only mindful, I had the privilege, I confess, only reading the summary, not the details of the Massachusetts study by the CDC as it relates to the compare and contrast of 3 feet versus 6 feet in terms of their own example. Of course, we have the benefit of WHO and other international studies that have guided California's guidelines, which are 4 to 6 feet. Now, we will look to update, augment, based upon what the CDC puts out. But again, be mindful, it's not just 3 feet versus 6 feet. It's 3 feet versus 6 feet with criteria as it relates to masking, as it relates to ventilation, as it relates to other non-pharmaceutical interventions. And so it's additive. And so we look forward to working through that in real time once we have more clarity from the feds.
Governor, on the vaccine, you mentioned that as supply picks up, people may start to have more choice between 1 dose or 2. The message so far has been take the vaccine that's available when it is your turn.
Yeah.
Do you foresee a future where people actually will have more of a choice between these vaccines, and would that perhaps address some of the vaccine hesitancy you've heard?
Yeah, the best vaccine is the next one available. And that's currently the case on the basis of the scarcity of the vaccines that are available. Once you have abundant number of vaccines, once you have millions and millions of vaccines, it's a completely different place. And people then can avail themselves to the opportunity to determine what's most beneficial or ideal for them, particularly based on their circumstances. They may be moving up and down the state, maybe traveling, maybe difficult family environment or business environment where one shot is definitely preferable to the uncertainty of going back with a scheduled second shot. So there's no question that's going to happen. Question is when. And that determination will be made by how quickly we get the supply manufactured. It's not a political decision, it's a manufactured supply decision. And I have confidence based upon what we know, what we've been told, not only by the Biden administration, but by the CEOs of these companies, that in May, we're going to be in a completely different place. June, July, we're going to be at a point where I'm confident that that choice will avail itself in very meaningful ways.
Can you give specific examples of school districts that are more likely to reopen now because of the $2 billion?
Oh, I think you've seen example after example, from LA Unified to examples in your own county, Madam Superintendent, and perhaps you're better equipped to answer that with more specific detail. But it's not just the $2 billion, it's the 4.6 additional, meaning it's $6.6 billion that's been made available for flexible purposes, which will allow for early learning loss and for getting kids back more safely into schools more quickly. But you're seeing it across the spectrum. It's availability as well of testing, which is really important, not as much of a focus as it used to be, but it should be. And California was the first in the country to get a federal waiver from CMS, where we are using the Medi-Cal, which is Medicaid nationwide, but Medi-Cal, where we are getting reimbursed for costs associated with those tests. That's a big boost to our testing capacity, particularly for low-income students. In addition to that, the prioritization of the vaccines, I think, has helped in terms of building confidence and allowing people to know that we have their back. And that money, of course, is just additive.
I have two more questions. I know you mentioned that it was a hypothetical question regarding Senator Feinstein.
Yep.
What are the names that you have in mind?
Yeah.
Should she choose to retire?
She should absolutely fill out the rest of her term. You guys, Carla knows this. I'm the last person to say anything except laudatory things about Senator Feinstein. She's been a friend of mine. She's been a mentor of mine. I've known her for the larger part of my life. I have a book signed when I took a Shakespeare class at Santa Clara University by Mayor Dianne Feinstein. I still keep it. So much of my family's history, my own personal history growing up in San Francisco, Moscone milk, George Moscone being one of my father's closest friends, her ascendancy to politics. I mean, I feel deeply connected to her, always supported her, will continue to. It was a hypothetical. I hope she terms out her entire term. She's a magnificent and extraordinary person. And I think there's been a little too much punditry around her current term. And I think we all would do a lot better if we move away from it. That said, when I was asked a direct question, I tend to answer direct questions. I got to work on that, perhaps. And one should also note, there's always a good out in politics. Don't answer hypotheticals. Thank you.
Hi, Governor.
Yeah.
There are still some school districts in California refuse to reopen. So what do you do to push them to reopen?
I think it's not what I'll do, it's what the parents are going to do. It's what their peers are going to do. It's what other districts are doing. As I say, success leaves clues. It's not static. A few weeks ago, it was less than 6,000 schools. A week and a half ago, it was 8,000. We just announced it's over 9,000 schools now have dates or firmly have committed or have currently reopened. So this is dynamic. It's moving very, very quickly. And you're seeing it's not just happening with the lower age cohorts. You're seeing now move to extend even the distance component, the hybrid components, to extending the days, extending the weeks. It's already happening for places that had opened with more modifications, now a little less. So I anticipate the overwhelming majority to be reopened very shortly.
You're saying May 1st, you expect everything to be open. Where do you see California on May 1st based on what you're hearing and what the president is projecting?
Well, and just to clarify, on May 1st, not everything's reopened. I want to clarify that.
I think in terms of vaccine,
Yeah.
Californians don't want to get the
Oh, yeah, no, in terms of just the availability. So we're currently receiving and it's helpful to reinforce this so you really have an understanding of the scarcity challenge we have currently. We received 1.7 million doses last week. We've administered in the last 7 days 2 million, 464,000 just in the last 24 hours. Our only constraint is manufactured supply. Next week, or rather at the end of this week, we'll receive 1.75 million, not significantly more. Next week, just shy of 1.8 million. So we're still in that scarcity frame, and that's limiting. And that's why you see a lot of these sites toggling back, not at full capacity. We have designed a system where we conservatively estimate we can administer 2.7 million doses a week, but we're only getting 1.7. The goal is to design by May 1st a system where we can do 4 million a week. And the expectation is with J&J, Janssen, with the other two vaccines, that manufactured supply will provide not only California but the nation the ability to move away from the current prioritization of tiers and open up those tiers to all age cohorts, all groups, 16 to 64 beyond. And we are anticipating that, and we're stair-stepping a strategy to get to that date. And that's why you saw modifications yesterday on our tiering, and we anticipate over the next few weeks to see more and more modifications as supplies become more available.
And with the second question, what do you say to California voters that voted for you that have also signed the recall for this, put their signature in for the recall?
Well, we've got to work harder, and we got to get more vaccines into people's arms. We got to get more businesses reopened. We just did $2.5 billion, $2.6 billion of small business grants. We're just getting those grants, not loans, getting them out in the hands of small businesses. I'm putting together a May revise for a business. You've seen nothing yet in terms of the supports we're going to provide our businesses and the capacity to jumpstart this economy. There's a bright light at the end of the tunnel. Kids are back in school. We're in school right now. Businesses are reopening. 47 counties now, as of today, out of the most restrictive tiers. 1.8% positivity. There's only 4 states in America lay claim to being less than 2%. We're making real progress, and that's what I would say, and that's where my focus is.
Governor, one more question, and that just has to do with the focus of vaccine distribution has very much been in LA and less in the Bay Area. We have at least heard that less of the supply is getting distributed here. Is that going to switch, or are the priorities for the regions going to switch?
Yeah, there's been sort of the baseline, the Bay Area's got a baseline of vaccines. There's this equity overlay, and that equity overlay unquestionably has benefited certain parts of the state. And I appreciate most of the Bay Area leaders I've talked to enthusiastically support the equity overlay. At the same time, want more vaccines, which I'm completely mindful of. And so we're working with each and every county, and trust me when I say this, each and every county. Each county is unique, distinctive, unique challenges, unique opportunities, and we are working through all of that. I'm smiling because my drive down, I was on the phone with a number of county supervisors representing different parts of the state. And so we're working through all of this, and over the next few days, you're going to be hearing a lot more in this space. I imagine next few hours, later this afternoon, we'll have an update in terms of those county ratios. A lot of the new administrative doses, none of the new information's coming out later this afternoon.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
This one?